I left my wife after she found out she was pregnant by her sister's husband, which led to a major family feud. I don't know how many yet, but I was inspired to write it after watching a video on TikTok about a story very similar to mine. Without further ado, I decided to share my own story. I've shared this story on another subreddit, but I'd like to hear your opinion. This is a new account, I just created it because my old one wasn't working. Everything started in 2014. My wife Elena was 27 years old at the time, and I, Luis, was 26. We had been in a relationship for 5 years and married for 2. We met at university, she was studying accounting, and I was studying mechanical engineering. We met at a mutual friend's party and immediately hit it off. After a few dates, we became a couple and got married the following year. Elena had an older sister named Adriana, who was married to a friend of Elena's named Ariel. Elena's mother, Valentina, never accepted me. She tried to come up with many excuses to separate us, and I can say that she really discriminated against me and humiliated me whenever she could. She always said that Elena deserved better. I thought my life was perfect. Elena was incredibly beautiful, the most stunning woman I had ever met at that time. My salary as a mechanical engineer was decent, and we had agreed not to have children soon. We first wanted to travel to a few countries and finish paying off a house. Elena agreed with me and was interested in studying for a master's degree, which I offered to pay for. I always wanted her to feel comfortable with me, so you could say I used to give in to my wife's requests. A year after we got married, Elena's mother had a fall that left her hospitalized for a couple of days. The doctors said it wasn't anything serious, but they recommended rest. Elena was worried about her mother and stayed with her. Time passed, and during the 30th wedding anniversary party of Elena's parents, 2 shocking announcements were made. Adriana had been struggling to have children for 5 long years, visiting fertility clinics without success. It was a heartbreaking situation for her, suffering in silence. Valentina's confession was the second shocking announcement. With a trembling voice and tears in her eyes, she expressed that she longed to become a grandmother. Her words, full of urgency, resonated deeply. One fall could be my end, and who knows when that could happen. I saw how Elena emotionally broke down upon hearing her mother's words. When we got home, my wife was noticeably affected by the weight of what had happened. I chose to ignore the situation, my mistake, something I didn't want to face. Months passed without further news until I received an urgent call from Elena. Her voice reflected anxiety as she explained that she was at the hospital. Alarmed, I asked, "Are you okay?" She answered yes, but that she was there because Adriana had attempted suicide. Adriana's inability to have children had plunged her into deep depression, and her mother's words, expressing her desire to be a grandmother, had been the trigger. Desperation led her to try to take her own life. As soon as I left work, I rushed to the hospital to support my wife. There, I found Valentina with a cold and somewhat accusatory look. Ariel, Julio, Valentina's husband, and my wife were also there. I tried to understand the situation, and to some extent, Valentina blamed me for Adriana's suicide attempt. According to her, her desire to be a grandmother and Adriana's inability to give her a grandchild had led her to try to end her life. The doctors discharged Adriana 2 days later and prescribed her antidepressants. That same day, we had a family meeting where we revisited the topic of grandchildren. Given Adriana's infertility, I suggested the idea of adoption as a viable alternative. Both Adriana and Ariel could adopt without any difficulty since they were adults with good incomes. There was an uncomfortable silence in the room. Valentina stared at me and rejected the idea, arguing that adopting a child wasn't the same as having a grandchild of her own blood. The conversation didn't progress, and we returned home with a tense atmosphere. The weeks following that meeting became strange. Adriana and Ariel started visiting our house more often. I often overheard them talking, but they would fall silent when I entered the room. I found this behavior odd, though I decided not to pay much attention to it. Perhaps Adriana was simply going through a tough time and needed to be with her sister. On the other hand, Elena's behavior changed. She became more secretive with her phone and distant from me. When I came home and tried to approach her, she pulled away. Our intimate life also diminished. On July 5th, a day I remember clearly, I came home from work and saw several cars parked in front of my house. I feared the worst. When I entered, I found my in-laws, my sister-in-law with her husband, and my wife in the living room. Their expressions were serious. Elena said, "Sit down. We need to talk." I nodded and sat down. I tried to ask what was going on, but my mother-in-law interrupted me, asking, "What solution can you give us?" I remained silent, not understanding what she meant. Then she added, "About my grandchildren." I tried to suggest in vitro fertilization, explaining how it worked, but I only saw displeasure on Valentina's elderly face. I noticed that she rejected my proposal and said, "I have another solution." When she said that, I looked at Elena, confused, but she didn't return my gaze. Instead, she looked at her sister and then at her mother. I saw Adriana smile while Ariel displayed an arrogant attitude, his smile turning mocking as he looked at me with superiority. I stayed silent and waited for Elena to say something, but she didn't speak, prolonging the silence. Suddenly, Elena yelled at me, "Idiot. Say something." I didn't understand and remained silent. Then my mother-in-law tried to calm Elena down, speaking with a certain elegance, "As you know, dear, Adriana has been cursed with the impossibility of giving us grandchildren." You can click on share and more to see if there is a part 2.